The cruelest betrayal is not when your enemy abandons you. It is when the person who promised to protect you is the one who lets go. Evelyn Hart stood beneath a gray autumn sky, her wrists trembling, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Hundreds of wolves filled the royal square. Their voices blended into a distant roar, like waves crashing against a rocky shore. Some stared with pity. Others looked away. No one stepped forward. No one spoke her name. At the center of the platform, she lifted her eyes toward the man she once loved. Alpha King Rowan Blackwood stood less than 20 feet away. His black coat shifted in the cold wind. His silver eyes remained fixed on the stone beneath his boots. He could command armies with a single word. Entire territories bowed before him. Yet in this moment, he could not bring himself to look at her. Evelyn felt something inside her crack. Not because of the accusations. Not because of the crowd. Not even because she had lost everything. What shattered her was the silence. 3 years earlier, Rowan had taken her hand beneath a moonlit forest and promised that no force in the world would ever stand between them. She remembered the warmth of his fingers, the certainty in his voice, the way he smiled only when they were alone. Back then, she believed promises lasted forever. She knew better now. A cold breeze swept across the square. The scent of pine drifted from the distant mountains. Somewhere beyond the castle walls, church bells echoed through the valley. Life continued as if her world were not ending. Evelyn swallowed hard. Her throat burned. Across the crowd, noble families watched from covered balconies. Advisors whispered behind gloved hands. The kingdom had already made its judgment. The prophecy had spoken. The king's Luna would bring ruin to the throne. Crops had failed. Storms had damaged villages. Fear had spread through the realm. People needed someone to blame. She had become the easiest answer. Yet even now, standing alone before an entire kingdom, Evelyn could not hate Rowan. That was the tragedy of it. Love did not disappear the moment trust was broken. Sometimes it lingered. Sometimes it stayed long after it. Should have died. Her gaze never left him. Please, she thought. Just look at me. For 1 second. Remember who I am. Rowan's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. For a brief moment, it seemed he might finally raise his head. The crowd fell strangely quiet. Hope flickered inside her chest. Then it vanished. Rowan remained motionless. The distance between them suddenly felt greater than 1,000 miles. A faint smile touched Evelyn's lips. Not because she was happy, because at last she understood. The king had already chosen his kingdom over her. Slowly, she drew a breath. Her voice emerged soft, barely louder than a whisper, yet somehow everyone heard it. I forgive you, Rowan. The words hung in the cold air. The king's eyes closed. The crowd stood frozen. And somewhere deep inside the Alpha King, a wound opened that would follow him for the next 3 years of his life. 3 years later, sleep had become a stranger to Rowan Blackwood. The king stood alone on a stone balcony overlooking the northern cliffs, watching moonlight spread across the sea like liquid silver. Far below, waves rolled against the rocks. Their steady rhythm should have been calming. Instead, it reminded him of a voice he could not escape. I forgive you, Rowan. Every night, those words returned. Every morning, they followed him into the daylight. Servants noticed the shadows beneath his eyes. Advisors noticed the silence that had replaced his once decisive commands. The kingdom saw a powerful ruler. No one saw the man slowly being hollowed out by regret. A cold wind tugged at his coat. Rowan barely felt it. His gaze drifted toward the distant forest stretching beyond the capital. Somewhere out there, memories waited like ghosts. He remembered the first time he met Evelyn. She had been kneeling beside an injured fawn near the riverbank. Not frightened, not confused, simply patient. The animal had trusted her immediately. Rowan had stood hidden among the trees, fascinated by the quiet kindness in her voice. Most people tried to impress a future king. Evelyn never did. She challenged him. She laughed at him when he deserved it. She reminded him that power meant nothing if it was not used with compassion. A sharp ache settled in his chest. He closed his eyes. The memory refused to fade. Back then, the future had seemed simple. They would rule together, build something lasting, create a kingdom strong enough to endure generations. Then the prophecy arrived. Everything changed after that. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Rowan turned. His oldest advisor stepped onto the balcony carrying a leather folder. The older man's face looked unusually tense. Your Majesty, he said carefully. There is something you need to see. Rowan accepted the folder without enthusiasm. Reports filled his desk every day. Border disputes, trade agreements, harvest projections. None of it mattered the way it once had. He opened the file anyway. The first page contained unfamiliar handwriting. The second contained testimony from a traveling scholar. By the third page, his pulse had quickened. He continued reading. Slowly, carefully. The ocean seemed to disappear. The wind vanished. Even the distant sounds of the city fell silent. Every line struck him harder than the last. His hands tightened around the papers. Where did this come from? He asked quietly. A messenger arrived before dawn, the advisor replied. He traveled nearly 800 miles to deliver it. Rowan stared at the final page. According to the documents, the original prophecy had never named Evelyn. Her name had been added later. Altered. Manipulated. Someone had changed the records before they reached the royal court. For a long moment, he could not breathe. The kingdom had built its judgment upon a lie. The woman he loved had lost everything because he believed the wrong person. Rowan looked toward the horizon. The rising sun painted the clouds gold. Somewhere beyond those mountains, beyond the forests, beyond 3 years of silence, a truth was waiting. And for the first time since that day in the square, hope frightened him more than guilt ever had. The discovery should have brought relief. Instead, it left Rowan feeling colder than ever. He remained in his study long after sunrise. The scattered documents spread across his desk like pieces of a shattered mirror. Every page pointed toward the same truth. The prophecy that changed the course of his life had begun with a single winter gathering 3 years earlier. He could still remember the night with painful clarity. Snow had fallen outside the royal hall, covering the kingdom in silence. Inside, hundreds of candles filled the room with golden light. Advisors, nobles, merchants, and pack leaders crowded beneath towering stone arches. At the center stood the kingdom's most respected seer, an elderly woman whose predictions had guided rulers for decades. Rowan had entered the hall with Evelyn beside him. She wore a deep blue gown that matched her eyes. Laughter followed her wherever she went. Even strangers felt comfortable around her. Children adored her. Elders trusted her. She had a way of making people feel seen. Rowan remembered squeezing her hand beneath the table before the ceremony began. She smiled back. Simple, warm, certain. Neither of them knew their lives were about to change. The seer stepped forward carrying an ancient scroll. Her voice trembled as she read the vision. A warning had come, she claimed. The future king's mate would bring ruin upon the throne. Darkness would enter through love. The kingdom would suffer because of the woman closest to the crown. The hall fell silent. Fear spread through the crowd like a sudden storm. Rowan remembered the uneasy glances, the whispers, the confusion. At first, no one connected the prophecy to Evelyn. Why would they? She had done nothing wrong. Weeks passed. Then strange events began to unfold. A drought damaged farmland in the Western Territories. Supply routes were interrupted by severe weather. Trade agreements collapsed unexpectedly. Every setback seemed to deepen public anxiety. Someone started feeding that fear. Quiet rumors appeared throughout the capital. Anonymous letters circulated among noble families. Servants repeated stories they could not verify. Gradually, suspicion found a target. Evelyn. Looking back now, Rowan saw what he had missed. The timing had been too perfect. The rumors too organized. None of it happened by chance. Someone had carefully built the narrative that eventually consumed the kingdom. His chest tightened. He remembered the countless evenings when Evelyn tried to speak with him. She had sensed the growing distance. She noticed how advisors suddenly interrupted their conversations, how meetings became closed doors, how trust slowly eroded. Yet she never stopped believing in him. That memory hurt the most. She trusted him completely. Rowan stared out the window. Clouds drifted across the mountains beyond the city walls. 3 years ago, he believed he was protecting his people. Now he understood a terrible possibility. The kingdom had not fallen victim to a dangerous prophecy. It had fallen victim to fear. And he had helped that fear destroy the one person who deserved his faith more than anyone else. Evelyn had never wanted a crown. That was what Rowan remembered most. Long before fear entered the kingdom, before prophecies, rumors, or suspicion, she had been perfectly content walking through the capital without guards at her side. While nobles competed for influence, Evelyn spent her mornings visiting marketplaces, bakeries, and schools. She knew merchants by name. She remembered birthdays. Children ran toward her whenever she appeared in the town square. The future Luna of the kingdom carried herself with a quiet grace that made people feel important. Rowan used to watch those moments from a distance. He loved seeing how naturally she connected with others. One spring afternoon, nearly 4 years before everything fell apart, they escaped the palace together. The air smelled of wildflowers. Bright sunlight danced across the river outside the city. Evelyn sat on a weathered wooden dock, her shoes abandoned beside her. Her feet skimmed the cool water while Rowan listened to her describe all the places she wanted to improve once she became Luna. She spoke about orphanages, rural schools, better roads connecting isolated villages. Her dreams were never about luxury. They were about people. You could ask for anything, Rowan had teased. A larger palace, jewels, private estates. Evelyn laughed. The sound still echoed clearly in his memory. What would I do with another castle? She asked. I already spend half my time trying to escape the one you live in. Rowan smiled despite himself. That is not a very royal answer. Good, she replied. Then maybe I will make it terrible royal. Looking back, the memory felt almost unbearable. Everything about her had been genuine. There was no ambition hidden beneath her kindness. No secret hunger for power. Yet somehow an entire kingdom eventually convinced itself she was dangerous. Rowan rose from his desk and crossed the room. Rain tapped softly against the window. Dark clouds gathered above the city. His reflection stared back from the glass. Older now. Harder. The man in the window barely resembled the person Evelyn once loved. Another memory surfaced unexpectedly. The night she noticed his growing doubts. He had returned late from a council meeting. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Reports of failed harvests had arrived that morning. Advisors argued constantly. The prophecy lingered over every discussion. Evelyn found him standing alone in the palace garden. Lanterns glowed among the hedges. Roses filled the air with their sweet scent. She approached quietly. You have been avoiding me, she said. Not angry, not accusing, simply honest. Rowan remembered looking away. He hated that memory now. Even then, she had given him every opportunity to trust her. There is pressure from the council, he answered. They are worried. Evelyn studied him carefully. Are you worried? The question lingered between them. Rowan should have said no. He should have taken her hand. Instead, uncertainty crept into the silence. That hesitation changed everything. Evelyn noticed it immediately. Her smile faded. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough to reveal the hurt she tried to hide. For the first time, Rowan understood exactly when he started losing her. It happened long before she left the kingdom. It began the moment he stopped choosing faith over fear. The deeper Rowan searched into the past, the more disturbing the pattern became. What once looked like coincidence now felt carefully arranged. Every rumor, every fearful whisper, every piece of evidence that had turned the kingdom against Evelyn seemed to lead back to the same small circle of people. Late that evening, rain swept across the capital. Water streaked down the tall palace windows while thunder rolled over distant hills. Rowan sat alone in the council chamber. A dozen candles flickered across the long oak table. Their golden light barely touched the corners of the room. Before him lay records collected from archives, merchant ledgers, court reports, even personal letters. Hours passed. The pile continued to grow. One name appeared again and again. Lord Victor Ashcroft. Rowan felt a chill crawl down his spine. Victor had been one of his most trusted advisors. Calm, intelligent, loyal, or so everyone believed. During the crisis years earlier, Victor had been among the loudest voices urging caution regarding Evelyn. He always sounded reasonable, never emotional, never cruel. Looking back, that made him even more dangerous. Rowan remembered countless meetings where Victor planted doubt without appearing to do so. We all hope the prophecy is wrong. No one wishes harm upon Lady Evelyn. The kingdom simply cannot ignore the warning. Small comments, gentle suggestions, seeds planted one conversation at a time. Rowan closed his eyes. Shame settled heavily over him. He had blamed fear. He had blamed circumstance. Now he was beginning to understand his own responsibility. No one forced him to stop trusting Evelyn. No one forced him to question her character. Others may have manipulated events, but the final choice had always been his. A knock interrupted the silence. His advisor entered carrying another sealed letter. This arrived from the Eastern Territories, the older man said. You should read it immediately. Rowan broke the seal. The letter came from a retired magistrate who had served during the investigation years earlier. His hands tightened as he read. According to the testimony, evidence against Evelyn had appeared mysteriously. Witness statements changed. Documents arrived without clear origins. Concerns were raised, yet every request for deeper examination had been quietly denied. The signature approving those denials belonged to Victor Ashcroft. Rowan pushed back from the table. His chair scraped sharply across the stone floor. For a long moment, he stood motionless. Rain hammered the windows. Thunder echoed through the chamber. The truth was finally taking shape. Someone had not merely encouraged fear. Someone had guided it, directed it, used it. And while an innocent woman lost everything, that person remained comfortably inside the palace walls. Rowan moved toward the window. Below, the city lights glowed through the storm. 3 years. Evelyn had carried the burden of a lie for 3 years. Somewhere beyond the horizon, she was living a life he knew nothing about. Maybe she hated him. Maybe she never wanted to see him again. The thought hurt more than he expected. Yet another realization struck him. He had spent 3 years mourning what he thought was gone forever. What if she was still out there? What if the story had not ended in the square? Lightning flashed across the sky. Rowan stared into the darkness beyond the glass. For the first time in years, a different question replaced his guilt. Not what had happened to Evelyn, but where she was now. The answer arrived 2 days later. Rowan was reviewing correspondence in his private office when a royal courier rushed through the doors carrying a weathered leather satchel. Dust covered the man's boots. His horse had clearly traveled hard. Without a word, the courier placed a folded map on the desk. Rowan opened it immediately. Several locations had been marked across the kingdom. Small villages, trading posts, remote settlements hidden near mountain ranges. At first, they seemed unrelated. Then he noticed a pattern. Every place had received aid from the same mysterious traveler over the past 3 years. A woman with golden blonde hair, blue eyes, a calm voice. No official title, no guards, no permanent residence. Yet everywhere she went, struggling communities improved. Wells were repaired. Schools reopened. Farmers received assistance during difficult seasons. Local leaders spoke of her with admiration. Some called her the wandering healer. Others called her the Silver Lady. Rowan felt his heartbeat quicken. One report described a woman spending 6 months in a fishing village after a devastating storm damaged dozens of homes. Another mentioned someone organizing food deliveries to isolated mountain families during an unusually harsh winter. None of the reports used Evelyn's name. They did not need to. He knew her too well. This was exactly what she would do. Even after everything she had endured, she was still helping people. The realization filled him with equal parts pride and sorrow. Most people would have become bitter. Many would have turned their backs on the kingdom forever. Evelyn had chosen kindness instead. Outside the palace, morning sunlight illuminated the capital. Merchants filled the streets. Carriages rolled through the market district. Life continued peacefully because countless people worked every day to keep the realm moving forward. Rowan suddenly wondered how many lives Evelyn had quietly touched while he remained trapped inside his guilt. His gaze drifted toward the final report. Unlike the others, this one had been written recently. Very recently. According to the document, a woman matching Evelyn's description had been seen less than 3 weeks earlier in a settlement near the western frontier. The village sat nearly 400 miles from the capital, surrounded by pine forests and rolling hills. Rowan stared at the page. 400 miles. For the first time, the distance did not seem impossible. It seemed reachable. A knock interrupted his thoughts. His advisor entered carrying fresh council schedules. Rowan barely glanced at them. "Cancel everything," he said. The older man blinked in surprise. "Everything, Your Majesty? Every meeting, every ceremony, every appearance." The advisor studied him carefully. "You are leaving." Rowan nodded. "I should have left 3 years ago." Silence settled between them. Then, slowly, the advisor smiled. Not because the situation was simple. Not because forgiveness was guaranteed. Because for the first time in years, the king was moving towards something instead of running from it. Rowan folded the map carefully and slipped it into his coat. Somewhere beyond the western frontier, Evelyn was living a life he no longer understood. She might refuse to see him. She might send him away. She had every right. None of that mattered now. He had. Spent 3 years searching for answers inside palace walls. The truth was waiting somewhere beyond them. The journey west took Rowan farther from the kingdom than he had traveled in years. By the third day, the stone road surrounding the capital had disappeared behind him. Dense forests stretched across the landscape. Pine trees towered overhead. Their branches swayed gently beneath a bright autumn sky. For the first time in a long while, he traveled without royal banners, ceremonial escorts, or crowds waiting for instructions. Only a single horse carried him forward. The simplicity felt unfamiliar. It also felt deserved. Each mile gave him more time to think. That was both a gift and a punishment. Memories surfaced constantly. Small moments he once overlooked now returned with startling clarity. Evelyn laughing as rain interrupted a royal ceremony. Evelyn teaching village children how to plant herbs behind a schoolhouse. Evelyn staying awake through the night beside a sick farmer's daughter because she refused to leave the child alone. Back then, Rowan admired those qualities. Later, he allowed fear to overshadow them. The contradiction haunted him. Near sunset on the fourth day, he arrived at a small roadside inn nestled between rolling hills. Smoke drifted from a stone chimney. Warm light glowed through the windows. Inside, travelers gathered around wooden tables, sharing stories from distant regions. Rowan took a seat near the fireplace and ordered a simple meal. No one recognized him. He preferred it that way. As the evening passed, conversations drifted through the room. Merchants discussed trade routes. Farmers spoke about weather patterns. Then one voice caught his attention. An older woman sitting nearby smiled as she described someone she had met several months earlier. "Kindest person I have ever known," she said. "She helped rebuild half the town after the flood." Another traveler nodded immediately. "Blonde hair?" he asked. "Blue eyes." The woman laughed. "That is the one." Rowan's pulse quickened. He remained silent, listening carefully. "People wanted to pay her," the traveler continued. "She refused every coin. Said helping was enough." Several others joined the discussion. To Rowan's surprise, they all seemed to know exactly who she was. One man described a community garden she helped organize. Another mentioned a school library she helped restore. A young mother quietly shared how a stranger had comforted her family during a difficult winter. Different towns, different stories. Yet the same woman appeared in every one. Rowan stared into the fire. Flames danced across the logs. A painful truth settled over him. Evelyn had spent 3 years building lives wherever she went. While he remained trapped in old mistakes, she kept moving forward. She kept healing. She kept choosing kindness. The realization made him proud. It also made him wonder whether there was still a place for him in her future. Later that night, sleep came slowly. The inn creaked softly beneath the mountain wind. Rowan lay awake staring at the ceiling. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, beyond another few hundred miles, Evelyn was living a life built without him. That thought should have discouraged him. Instead, it strengthened his resolve. For years he searched for forgiveness without taking a single step toward earning it. Now every mile mattered. Every sunrise brought him closer to the woman he never should have lost. 6 days later, Rowan reached the western frontier. The landscape had changed dramatically. Towering mountains rose against the horizon. Evergreen forests stretched for miles. Small farming communities dotted the valleys between winding rivers. Life moved more slowly here. People seemed less concerned with royal politics. They cared about harvests, family, and surviving the coming winter. As Rowan rode through one village after another, he noticed something unexpected. Evelyn's influence remained everywhere. A schoolhouse carried fresh paint despite limited resources. A damaged bridge had been repaired using volunteer labor. Community gardens flourished beside churches and meeting halls. Each improvement seemed modest on its own. Together, they told a remarkable story. At a small bakery near the edge of a mountain town, Rowan stopped for breakfast. The scent of cinnamon and fresh bread filled the air. Behind the counter, an elderly woman greeted customers by name. When Rowan casually mentioned the blonde traveler described in earlier reports, the woman's face brightened immediately. "Miss Evelyn?" she asked. Rowan nearly dropped his coffee cup. Hearing her name spoken aloud after so long felt strangely unreal. "You know her?" he asked. The woman laughed softly. "Half the frontier knows her." She pointed toward a wall covered with children's drawings. "She started art classes for local families last year. Stayed through the entire season." Rowan studied the colorful pictures. Mountains, Rivers, wildflowers, smiling families. Several drawings included a blonde woman surrounded by children. Something tightened in his chest. "Where is she now?" he asked carefully. The baker hesitated. "Not here anymore. She left about 4 months ago." His hope faltered. Then she continued. "But she visits a settlement north of here, a place called Pine Hollow. People there adore her." Rowan thanked her and stepped outside. Crisp mountain air filled his lungs. For the first time, Evelyn no longer felt like a memory. She felt real, close, reachable. The road to Pine Hollow wound through dense forests. Sunlight filtered through tall pines. Fallen leaves covered sections of the trail in gold and crimson. As evening approached, Rowan reached a scenic overlook nearly 2,000 feet above the valley floor. From there, he could see smoke rising from distant chimneys. A small settlement rested among rolling hills beside a clear blue lake. Pine Hollow. His horse slowed as they descended toward the village. Rowan's pulse quickened with every passing minute. What would he say if he found her? No apology seemed large enough. No explanation could erase the years she lost. The closer he came, the more uncertain he became. Twilight settled across the valley. Lanterns flickered to life along dirt roads. Laughter drifted from nearby homes. Then Rowan noticed something that made him stop completely. Near the center of the village stood a newly built community hall. Warm light spilled from its windows. Through the glass, he could see dozens of people gathered inside. At the front of the room stood a woman, with golden blonde hair, speaking to a crowd that listened with admiration. Rowan forgot how to breathe. After 3 years of searching through memories, regrets, and unanswered questions, he was finally looking at Evelyn again. Rowan remained hidden beneath the shadows of a large pine tree across the road. He could have walked into the building immediately. He could have called her name. Instead, he stood motionless, watching through the window like a man staring into a life that no longer belonged to him. Evelyn looked different. Not older in a way that time alone could explain. Stronger. The uncertainty he remembered had vanished. Confidence rested naturally in her posture. She moved through the room, greeting people with easy warmth. Children gathered around her without hesitation. Elderly residents smiled whenever she passed. Nobody treated her like an outsider. Nobody questioned her worth. They looked at her the way his kingdom once should have. Rowan felt pride swell inside him. Then came regret. A young girl tugged gently on Evelyn's sleeve. Evelyn immediately knelt beside her, listening with complete attention. The child spoke excitedly about something Rowan could not hear. Evelyn laughed softly. A moment later, she handed the girl a small notebook from a nearby table. The child's face lit up with joy. Rowan remembered seeing that same expression years ago inside the Capitol. Some things about Evelyn had never changed. The meeting continued for another hour. Villagers discussed projects, upcoming harvest plans, repairs needed before winter arrived. Evelyn listened more than she spoke. When disagreements appeared, she guided conversations calmly toward solutions. No title stood beside her name. No crown rested on her head. Yet everyone in the room naturally trusted her leadership. That realization struck Rowan harder than he expected. Back at the palace, advisors constantly fought for influence. Here, people followed Evelyn because they believed in her. Darkness settled across Pine Hollow. One by one, families left the community hall. Lanterns flickered along quiet streets. Laughter drifted through the cool evening air. Rowan remained where he was, unable to move. Fear had returned. Not fear of rejection. Fear of seeing what his choices had cost him. Eventually, the building emptied. Only Evelyn remained inside. She gathered papers from a table near the front entrance. For a brief moment, she paused beside a window. Moonlight illuminated her face. Rowan's breath caught. 3 years had passed. Yet seeing her again felt strangely familiar, like hearing a favorite song after years of silence. Then something unexpected happened. Evelyn slowly turned toward the window. Her blue eyes focused directly on the darkness outside. Directly on him. Rowan froze. The distance between them measured less than 50 feet, yet it felt impossible to cross. For several seconds neither moved. Neither looked away. Evelyn's expression remained unreadable. No surprise. No anger. No visible emotion at all. She simply stared at him. Then, without a word, she set down the papers in her hands and walked toward the front door. Rowan's heart pounded harder with every step she took. The door opened. Cool mountain air drifted between them. After 3 years of silence, They stood face to face once again. Neither knew what to say first.